so that we have a recording of the session in case there's folks who are interested but weren't able to make it today. So it looks like, Jeff, you already have presenter rights. If you want to, I don't know if you're going to present or if you want Kyle to share his screen, you can go ahead and
give him I think I'll share my screen. If someone could give me presenter access, that would be great. Perfect.
Okay, great. I did paste a link to the agenda in the chat, so if you've not already gone there and signed in, please do. The two main things we have, well, the primary thing we have on today's agenda is the NYU report on the results from UX testing that they had conducted in conjunction with University of Hawaii and Walsh University. So Kyle will be going through that and discussing the findings and the recommendations that they're going to be making as a result of that. And so we'll have some time to talk about that a little bit as a group. And then at the end, if there's time, I also had an issue that Matt Clare and the accessibility group had forwarded to us. So I'll just bring that up at the end for discussion if there's time after the NYU presentation. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to Kyle, and you can go ahead and share your screen whenever you're ready.
Okay, great, thanks. I'm trying to share my screen now, so let's see if that's actually happening. Can everyone see my screen at all?
I don't see it yet.
Not yet? Oh. Okay, interesting. I wonder why that is. Okay, let me try and stop doing that and try it again.
Yeah, that sometimes helps.
Okay, Java plugin has crashed. Okay, I'm sorry, guys. Give me 1 second.
No problem.
Yeah, the screen sharing can always be a little finicky in Big Blue Button. So
it is finicky. I mean, I found in Firefox just with that, and also with audio, that if I restart Firefox before I try anything, I get better results generally.
Okay, sorry. So maybe we can try that again. Sorry about that. It's Java. Lovely Java.
Yeah.
Can one of you give me the presenter again? Sorry about that.
Yeah. Oh, I see 2 Kyle Blythes now.
And I have no idea why that's happening.
Oh, actually, do you know what? I saw you talking, so I think I give it to the right one.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Let me try this again. We'll eventually get this running. Okay, run. There we go.
Yeah.
Yep, it's showing. Great.
That was great. We were actually testing the usability of Big Blue Button, so surprise.
Not a surprise.
Awesome. Cool.
Great. Yeah, so let me go ahead and start presenting. So hi everyone. This is Kyle Blythe from NYU, along with Jeff Pash from NYU, and we're going to be talking about the results from our usability testing that we did on the naming conventions for the My Workspace area and the existing home tool, which is that series of synoptic tools that usually load at the beginning of a course or project site in Sakai. So I'm going to hand it off to Jeff to start, and we'll go from there.
Great. Okay, so we're going to be talking about sort of the purpose of our testing, what motivated this. We'll briefly go through, review the testing protocol, which we've been through, but we'll just touch on that again for folks who haven't seen it. Kyle will go through the results of the testing and the recommendation. Okay, so just a little background here. So in the course of developing Morpheus, this home icon you can see on the right there was introduced in place of My Workspace, and it was pretty well received in the Morpheus planning calls and on the list. People seemed to take to that. However, as you can see, it left us with two homes, the home that replaced my workspace, and then the home tool, or rather, that's a grouping of synoptic tools on a page called home in a course site, but most people think of that as a tool. And many agreed that that was a little bit confusing and a problem. Okay. So that change prompted some discussions in the Morpheus planning calls around changing the name of the home tool in course site, since folks seem to be pretty happy with home, as the new name for my workspace. So one proposal was to change it to dashboard. So we picked up the conversation at Sakai camp in January earlier this year, and there wasn't a consensus on how we name these two elements, my workspace and the home tool. So the group made a recommendation to conduct usability testing to help us determine what names for these tools might make most sense to actual users in the system. I mean, we're all, well acquainted with Sakai. Many of us have admin. We approach the system differently from actual users. So we all agreed, let's put it in front of actual users. So we volunteered to conduct usability testing in consultation with this group. So I'll move on to the testing protocol. So what was our goal? Well, it was to determine which naming and styling options for the current My Workspace area and also the current Home tool would allow users to accomplish their intended goals as easily and directly as possible. So that's just a pretty straightforward, statement around usability testing. And how did we do it? So we measured the degree to which test participants were able to navigate to the current My Workspace and the current Home tools with different naming and styling options, and those varied across participants, those different combinations of options. We recorded the test participants' confidence level in their selections, which they did on a scale of 1 to 5, and we'll talk about that in a moment, how that was presented. And then finally, at the end of that testing, we supplemented those results with a final measure of user preference, so self-report user preference for the naming, for various naming option combinations. So that was just, sort of one final piece, and we'll talk about why we did that. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. So why did we think this was a good idea? So we had done user research, including usability testing with prototypes within the development of the new gradebook, NG, and that had yielded positive outcomes for us. And it was also a really good opportunity, since we had an accessibility and usability firm that we were working with and had already developed a script. It was a good opportunity to consult with them and leverage the work that we had done. So in terms of methodology, we created a script testing 2 different scenarios. And then, as I said, we supplemented that with a measure of user preference. And in terms of how we delivered logistically, we used Google Sites to present screenshots of the Sakai UI with different combinations of naming options, varied by participant again, and then a screen containing all naming option combinations to get that final preference measure. And these are the different permutations that we looked at. So that is for My Workspace, we looked at Home and Dashboard. For the Home tool, we looked at Home, Dashboard, and Overview. So these were discussed at Sakai Camp. We kept that relatively small because we had to control the number of options. Because we have to do permutations of those, it just gets larger and larger and larger in scale. One option that was discussed was, why don't we call My Workspace area maybe My Sakai? And then for different institutions, they can call it My, whatever the name of their instance is. That was problematic, because we don't know what an institution is going to call their instance. So for example, just with NYU, our instance of Sakai is NYU classes. So if we were to call that My NYU classes, it sort of makes it seem like, well, that's where I go to see my classes. And we didn't want to leave, the name of a major element in the system to chance, essentially. Okay. So then moving on, the testing protocol, this was the scenario, 2 scenarios presented to the user. Just briefly, so you logged into the learning management system and landed at the default landing page in the system. There you saw an assignment called Week 3 Homework listed on the calendar, and you quickly jumped into a course site to view the assignment. So that was kind of the setup. So then once we gave folks that scenario, go to the next slide here. I'm just kind of jumping back between the presentation and the screen share. And it looks like we're very well in sync, so that's good. So we shared this link. So this is essentially just a static screenshot. And we used Google Sites to present this to them because that really allowed us to be sort of efficient in our testing and also for us to be consistent across the different trials. It was a lot easier to use a Google Site to do this. So that scenario that I just read, we repeated that to them just to make sure that they got it, since there was a little bit of clicking between, telling them that and getting this up on the screen. And we asked them, where they might click to return to the initial landing page. So I'm shortening a little bit here, but, we presented the whole script in a previous meeting and we have that available. So in interest of time. So essentially we asked them, what made them think to click there? How confident they were on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being very unsure, 5 being very sure, that clicking there would take them where they want to go. And we asked if there were, any other changes to the interface that would, help them improve their measure of confidence. So that was the first scenario, and that was getting at, in a more natural way, hey, you're off here in a site, you want to get back to that initial landing page, where do you go? And so that was testing their reaction to home as a place to do that. And then the second piece of that was, we keep them on that same screen and we say, well, you're still here in your course site and you'd like to go to a screen that summarizes the information and activities for the course site. And so then on that next screen, we see that same screenshot. Here we were seeing how easily they would identify the first tool in the course site. In this case, it's named Overview as the place to go, for this, the place that summarizes information activities. Again, we asked them what made them think to click there, how confident were they in that choice, and if there were other changes that would improve their confidence. And then on the next 2 slides, you can just see these are some of the different combinations. So you can see, the home and dashboard combination. You can see the dashboard and home combination, for example. Okay. So now, once we did that, and that was very good information, we wanted to supplement those results with a measure of user preference for these different combinations. So on the next slide, we presented this landing page options. So here we asked them to identify the difference between the 2 screenshots, which most users did fairly quickly and easily. This got them to attend to those areas we were interested in. And we let them know that this is indeed the landing page that they see when they first enter the system. So we were all, on the same page. There's no other way to say it. And we asked them which of the options that they prefer and if they had any other suggestions for what they'd like the area to be called. So for folks who were in a trial where they didn't see dashboard as this landing page, this was an opportunity for them to see that as an option and to sort of, provide a little more rich data for us. And then we did the same for the summary tool option. So we repeated that, for that tool that summarizes the information and activities for the course site. And here you can see there are 3 options here, 1 down at the bottom, but there are actually 5 different options of naming and also of styling of these icons. So this brings up one of the tricky aspects of the testing, which is the fact that we're not only interested in the naming of one area or 2 sort of discrete areas, for example, changing my workspace to home, but rather we want to try to figure out which combination of these naming options makes the most sense to the users because they are closely related. And Kyle will talk about that more in a moment. One other thing we did when we presented those options is we did it all on one page. Here, and I don't know how it's coming across on this screen share, a little jumpy, but that's all right. Essentially, it's just showing that we have all these on one page, so they could scroll up and down on the page to see those different combinations to help make that connection, that the two are interrelated. And we saw this a lot. Folks would say, oh, well, if that's called home here, then I wouldn't want it to be called home, in the course side as well. Okay, so that's briefly the protocol. So now I'll turn it over to Kyle to talk about some of the challenges of testing and the results.
Great, thanks, Jeff. So yeah, I think this is a good opportunity to mention some of those challenges that accompany testing. So Jeff was mentioning one of them, but there are a few, and these include the fact that, and I think this is true with all UX testing, but even with a comprehensive script, different test facilitators will always conduct testing in different ways, which will kind of yield slightly different results. There's also the fact that facilitators must attempt, when doing this testing, to guide users to navigate to the appropriate areas. So My Workspace or the Home tool, but they can't refer to either of them by name. So therefore, they have to use descriptors for each of these. And they have to be careful to not use any terms that would coincide with the potential naming choices either. So they have to try and help to clarify the differences between these two areas for the participant when needed. So saying that, for example, one of these is a default landing page in the system, whereas the other is a page within the core site that summarizes site information and activities. And the last one, I think this is a big one that we'll see come up during the actual results, is one that Jeff was talking about a moment ago. And that's that in order for the testing to be successful, the tester must be able to not only recognize the difference between these two areas, but also the connection between them. So that, with this testing, they have the ability to provide naming conventions for both of the areas. And that they have the ability to set these names in relation to each other as a combination. So that's key, as one's idea of a home tool in a site changes when you think of it in relation to another system-wide sort of home area. And during the testing, they cannot be told about this relationship outright, as it would sort of necessitate explaining the two areas themselves. But if the user does not arrive at that conclusion, it can end up skewing the results, with them potentially amending their sort of natural preference for one name in order to accommodate what they perceive to be sort of a fixed name for the other element. So it's not them amending decisions in relation to each other, but just because they don't see that one of them can be changed as well. So again, we'll talk about this more in a bit. But as a whole, it's a tricky balancing act. And it was to be expected that not all of the test participants would either correctly identify the different areas or would not understand the relation between the naming of the two as a combination. So early last month, the completed testing protocol, along with all of the accompanying screenshot variations, was sent out on list in order for interested folks to help us out with testing. And the University of Hawaii and Walsh University really stepped up here and were a huge help in this endeavor. So I just want to say thank you to them because their input here was huge. They, along with us at NYU, were able to gather results from a total of 28 different participants, which is a really great number for usability testing. And moreover, these participants covered a range of different user roles, which provided a variety of perspectives that really helped to round out the results. So participants here included faculty, support admins, and both undergraduate and graduate students. So we're going to jump into the results in a second here, but I thought it might be nice to actually show how we sort of aggregated all of this data first. So I'm going to kind of quit out of this presentation for a second and briefly show this spreadsheet here, where we basically took all of our results and put them together. We showed the combination that was used for testing for an individual test participant, and then whether they were able to correctly identify My Workspace and their confidence in doing so. Same with the Home tool and their confidence there. And then their preferences for My Workspace and the Home tool. And since I think all of our eyes will start to glaze over if we look at this for more than like 5 more seconds, I'm going to actually go back to the presentation where I pulled some of the information out. So let's go back there. Okay, great. So let's start with the results from my workspace. So again, as I mentioned a moment ago with the challenges, while we talk through these results, there will be a couple of qualifications that accompany them. Given the complexity of this testing protocol and the fact that no two facilitators lead a session the exact same way, there were bound to be some discrepancies in the administration of these tests, and therefore some quirks in the results. Thankfully, as many of these sessions were recorded, we were able to go back and review individual test sessions, and more often than not, there were some really clear reasons why certain results and patterns emerged. So in this instance, with my workspace, while home was tested more than dashboard, you can see that 46% of the testers correctly identified the landing page navigation, pointing to the home button in the top left of the interface. Now, with less than 50%, that may seem a little bit low, but there's actually a pretty good reason for it. So going back and looking through recordings, in multiple occurrences where folks did not identify the landing page, it was actually because they had scrolled their screens down and did not have the top of the interface displaying on their screen, and therefore couldn't actually see the My Workspace home. So I think that helps to clarify why only 11 people identified that navigation. But regardless, we can also see that with dashboard, none of the testers presented with this actually correctly identified that navigation. But most importantly, of those that correctly identified home as a landing page navigation, 8 out of 11 provided a confidence measure of 4 to 5, meaning that they felt very confident in their selection. So I think that's really great. And next, I want to transition from this idea of navigation to preference for my workspace. So here we have the results of user preference for this area. So as you can see, home led the way with 11 votes. Dashboard came in second with 7 votes. We received a number of no preference votes, and we're not able to capture a preference from 6 participants. We did get 1 suggestion for quote unquote home page, which could have counted as a vote for home, but we wanted to separate that out and provide it here anyway. So while home definitely took the win, it's not that massive of a lead over dashboard. We thought this was very interesting based off of quotes we had gathered during our NYU testing. And again, this goes back to the challenges. We went back and looked through the results, and interestingly, many of the people who voted for dashboard did so because they did not sort of fully understand that difference between My Workspace and the course home tool. In fact, they chose dashboard for the My Workspace area not because it in and of itself made more sense than home, but because they looked at the breadcrumbs in the interface. So, when you think about the Morpheus interface, the screenshot we used for this depicted the home tool in the context of My Workspace. So you then see this sort of breadcrumb where you have home and then a breadcrumb followed by home again. And when they saw that, they felt that dashboard made more sense, if only because it prevented this repetition. So therefore, they did not sort of grasp that they were deciding the names for both of these areas in combination and had control over both of them. So had they seen the difference between these and the relation between the two, I believe we'd see the results skew more heavily towards home, since many of these participants did originally like the home button. And here we have a couple of choice quotes from participants regarding this landing page navigation. So we have, home is home. It is the place you start. Everything other than that is not home. We also have home is always in the top left, and home implies where you enter. So this was actually something we heard quite often, that it felt natural for users to find home in the top left of the interface, or that landing pages almost always equate to a quote unquote home page. Another thing worth pointing out here, as you can see, people felt that there was a lot of clarity around this notion of home existing as sort of the first thing in the interface. And from an accessibility perspective, with us speaking with our usability and accessibility firm, they really liked this idea of home, both because the naming here is consistent with other applications, and when thinking about this from a screen reader's perspective, it makes sense that the landing page home navigation should be read first. And then we have a quote about dashboard. I hear the word dashboard all the time. It always means something different. It's very arbitrary. So with this last quote, we heard stuff like this quite a bit as well, there was a general unease or a lack of clarity that accompanied people's reactions to the word dashboard. I'll talk about that more in a bit, but for now though, let's move on to the results for the Home Synoptic Tool page. Okay, so here we have our results with 3 different options: Home, Dashboard, and Overview. You can see here, while Overview was used most often as the Home tool option, with 18 participants testing this, 67% of them correctly identified this as a page that summarizes information and activities for the site. Participants that had Dashboard as the Home tool correctly identified this tool 57% of the time, while only 1 out of 3 testers correctly identified the tool when it was labeled the existing Home. The confidence measure amongst those that correctly identified the tool was uniformly high. So now, again, it's worth clarifying these results. For those that were not able to determine the Home tool in a site, regardless of what naming convention was used, more often than not, this was a result of previous error or confusion about the 2 different areas being tested. I know I sound like a bit of a broken record, but that understanding of the 2 areas is so fundamental. We occasionally saw testers point to the site's Home tool for the previous scenario, thinking that the Home tool was actually the landing page in the system. This, of course, skews results for the rest of the testing. Overall, though, we see Overview and Dashboard working similarly well for testers. And last, we have the tester's preference regarding Home tool names. So the numbers here, unfortunately, do not provide as strong of a pattern as the My Workspace results did. Partly, this is just due to the fact that a large number of the testers did not provide a preference. You can actually see 16 NA responses there at the bottom. So Overview still takes the lead here, with 5 testers preferring that name convention. Interestingly, the existing Home tool comes second place. And I think it's worth noting, though, that all 3 of the testers that preferred that name were not able to correctly identify the different navigation paths during the earlier portion of the testing, and were not able to identify the difference between those 2 areas. So therefore, these users were not confronted with the confusion of having 2 different areas called Home. And we know that this prompts confusion based on other test participants' reactions when we showed them the different landing page and summary page options with these multiple homes. For example, we had one participant who said literally, quote unquote, "Wow, that's a lot of homes!" exclamation point. So we think it's something to be taken into consideration in looking at the results. And actually, along those lines, we received 2 different suggestions for a course Home tool, which is interesting. These were both folks who identified the issue, but still liked the idea of a Home tool in the site, hence the clarification of course Home. We also received 1 vote for a course summary tool, and with just 1 vote, we also have Dashboard. So why is this? As we mentioned earlier, a lot of people seem to have an aversion to the name Dashboard. They felt that it was too technical, or that it was an ambiguous and arbitrary name. They might have an idea as to what a dashboard is, but felt that this was different for everyone. So in general, some felt that this was an up-and-coming term, the meaning of which hadn't really yet solidified. Now, let's move on to the quotes for this. So these are some quotes just about the Home tool here. So I like the name Overview. Makes sense to me since it's the overview of everything going on in the course. For me, a dashboard is somewhere I go to change settings. So that sort of ambiguous nature of what dashboard actually means. And if I wanted to go to this class's homepage, I would click on the class overview. But if I wanted to go back to the overview of all my classes, I would hit the home button on the top left. So I think that summarizes it pretty well. So next, I'd like for us to go into a recommendation for this. So based off of the results that we've got, for My Workspace, the recommendation that we have is to rename My Workspace to Home. And then for further clarification, because I think this really helped, placing the text Home next to the house icon in the upper left of the interface, so that you can actually see it say Home in the top of the interface. And then for the Home tool, based off of all the feedback and results there, rename the Home tool to Overview. And just to sort of show that again, here we have the screenshot that contains both Home and an Overview tool in the left menu here. Okay, so that pretty much covers it. And I'm sure we have some questions, so I'd like to open it up from there.
Great, thank you. That was an excellent overview. So I noticed most folks joined in listen-only mode, so if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat and I can read them off for the recording. Or if you do have a microphone, feel free to chime in. I'm seeing some kudos from folks in the chat, but no questions yet. Does anybody have a sense of, how they feel about the recommendations? If you're in favor, or...
Right. Yeah, I see Louisa brought up a great point that that Kyle and I had talked about, that the overview icon looks similar to the tests and quizzes icon. Yeah, that's absolutely right. The icons, maybe a month or so ago, there were some changes made to the icons. So I think we would have to, because it does look, very similar to that tests and quizzes icon, we could look at that more carefully. There are some different tests and quizzes icons we could use. So I think that's something of a great point and something we could discuss.
I see a question from Laura in the chat. I may have missed the comment relating to this, but is it necessary to have the word home next to the home icon?
So, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, no, go ahead. Your turn.
Sure. So, I think that, based off of what we were experiencing and testing, that having the word home in the top left of the interface actually was hugely helpful for people. That, in most interfaces that have this sort of, navigation to go back to a landing page, you do actually have text that explicitly points that out. And I think that right now, if we just have a house icon in the upper left, it does have a tendency to sort of get lost in the interface because it's not contained in a button the way that the actual course sites are. And during our testing here, we actually did have a participant that said, I wish it was a little bit more prominent in the interface. So I think at the very least, having the text saying home next to it does help to clarify that. And of course, there is the benefits of accessibility that way, that screen readers can see that and point that out to users as well.
Yeah, on the topic of the button, so right now, I think there are some different options around that. I think when we, as Kyle said, when we added that home, it kind of stood out not only as an element, it made it clear that that was an element they could click on, but also that there's something kind of special about it. So it definitely helped to clarify. Now, when they do click on it, one of the things that came up at Sakai Camp and that we saw with some other users is when you just have the home and it turns blue, it doesn't give you, it's hard to see that relative to anything else. It just looks like, oh, well, I don't know where I am and there's a blue home up here at the top. But when you click on it, and I don't know if there are maybe screenshots we can show of that. Once you click on it, it does sort of buttonize it, so you can kind of see that in relationship to the other sites. So you can kind of see, okay, I must be here because I see these buttons along the top, and this one is blue. These other ones are gray. So that seemed to work well for people.
So I'm assuming that the buttonizing aspect is part of the recommendations as well.
I'm sorry, say that again.
The making it with the button looking blue around it and text. That's part of the recommendations also for the
Yes.
PMC.
Yep.
Yeah, I like the button. I think it makes it stand out a little more.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Karen. Thanks for the great research. I agree with the recommendations. I'm assuming overview will be the course screen that has the site info display block and synoptic tools, etc. Is that correct? Yep, that's correct. If so, how does the new dashboard tool fit in fit into all this? I think right now it's not clear what the state of the status of the dashboard tool is for the release of 11. I think that at least in talking with Matt Jones, there was the idea of, really this being used in that what's currently my workspace area. So, and not in individual course sites at this point. But right now, it's unclear if dashboard tool is going to be unstealthed in Sakai 11. And I'm just looking to see who else is in the call. Wilma or Kyle, do you have anything to add to that on dashboard?
Yeah, I mean, basically there's still several blocker bugs related to dashboard that are out there, and a few other feature requests and things, and it hasn't really been able to see enough attention to really get it in good shape for the .0 release. So it looks like at this point anyway that it might be stealthed in the .0 release, and then maybe in 0.1 once we've got a little more time to work on it, then it would actually be unstealthed. So yeah, so dashboard's a little bit in limbo right now.
Right. Yeah, so Sean is asking about recommendations for the home tool in my workspace. We didn't specifically focus on that, but at this point we would probably use overview for that as well. And it kind of ties to the dashboard bit, because I think in the future that the dashboard and that capability to see these things across sites is going to be really valuable for folks, and that will kind of influence what that naming is in the future. But yeah, right now it's we have overview for that. Louisa had, what if the overview icon indicates something like start here, for example, Windows Start menu? I just Googled a few. We did test, it was going by kind of quickly. We tested a few different icons for overview, and the one that we're presenting seemed to resonate pretty well. Yeah, any other thoughts on that, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, so I do know that we received, and I'm obviously paraphrasing, but we received a couple of quotes from people that really liked that sort of list-based icon for overview, because it suggested that, oh, this is where I can go to see a sort of summary, and that summarizes my site, which in a lot of ways the site info display does do, because that's where you sort of provide a brief descriptor of your class, and provide you have the synoptic tools for seeing recent announcements, things like that. So that's why we chose that icon for this recommendation.
Yep. And then back to Sean, said, thank you for the work that you guys have done. Thank you, Sean. Tip of the hat. The results you presented make it obvious that the tools themselves are the issues. Too many places and options without clear definition for what the different places and tools do and are for, without a clear definition. Oh yeah, okay. What the tools do and are for. I think I probably edited mid-reading. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I think that one of the challenges here, and this kind of comes up in the next question around what do other LMSs do for this, is because unlike a normal website, we have kind of sites within sites, right? So you have your overall Sakai instance. You log in, you have your My Workspace, but then every course site or project site is kind of in a way its own site. So there aren't loads of precedents out there, but in looking at other LMSs, I don't think they've figured it out. I mean, we did look at Moodle, and it's straight up confusing. They do use dashboard in some places, they use home in other places, but we were pretty baffled by it. Canvas does use this. When you log in, they have this double menu situation going in on the left. They do use the term dashboard, but what it is doesn't really feel like a dashboard. And again, it kind of highlights this fact that dashboards are sort of many things to many different people, and sometimes depending on the discipline they come from. So yeah, we didn't see great ideas and great solutions to this in the other LMSs. But you can take a look and see sort of for yourself the glory that's happening in those other ones. We are functional leaders in the LMS community by tackling this. That's a great point. I'm glad you mentioned it, Laura. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think, and I'm, Kyle and I've been really excited by this, that, by using this usability testing and really putting a focus on this, that we can be seen as a leader in terms of user experience for the LMS. I mean, I think that's how Canvas kind of got their foot in the door. I mean, they saw, just take a look at Blackboard and Moodle navigation, and it's really clear, that by making some improvements to user experience, to the interface, it can go a long way. And I think we can go beyond that. And if you pop through Canvas these days, there's a lot of, I mean, I mentioned kind of the double menus. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to set Sakai apart. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, one of the things I think is so important about the work that NYU has done, and University of Hawaii and Walsh also participated in that, is really getting that feedback from the end users. It's so important to, because I mean, the people designing it don't always think of it the same way. So getting that feedback from the people that are actually using it day in, day out is critical.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions for Jeff and Kyle? Nope. Okay, well, thanks again for the wonderful presentation summarizing the results, and for all the work you did putting together the protocol and collecting all the results. It's been really, really awesome. So we very much appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys coming on to the monthly call here to share your results. So thank you. And looks like we've got a few more kudos in the chat from Matt. Thank you. This is awesome, guys. Thanks so much for putting it together. So I think we can all echo that.
Great. Thank you. And thanks again to University of Hawaii and Walsh, and also to you, Wilma, for helping to coordinate.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Okay, so we do have a few minutes left, and I did want to bring up one item that was forwarded to me from the accessibility group. So I've actually pasted the text of the email into the agenda, but let's see. Kyle, if you could give me screen share, I'll try to pull it up and just kind of show.
I don't know if I actually have the ability to do that or not.
Let me see if I can. Oh, wait, I think
Okay.
I was able to
You
take
got
it back. Okay, cool. I didn't know I could do that. All right, so let me try to see if I can get my screen share working. There's like 5 different Java things you have to agree to. Okay. All right, so you guys see on my screen, should be seeing the agenda and notes right now. So I'm just going to kind of summarize the issue a little bit and then show you in Sakai version 10 versus 11, just to kind of highlight the difference, because that was helpful for me when I was reading through this. So basically, the issue came up on the accessibility call, dealing with an issue with the new button in worksite setup. In terms of accessibility, where the edit and delete buttons are, in terms of on the page, they've lost their markup, which is a problem for accessibility. But it's also a usability issue just because of the placement of the buttons. So I think the accessibility group was wondering if this was kind of an intentional thing or if it was just sort of something that kind of happened when a lot of the menus got changed to more of a tab style. So Matt had actually done a little mock-up of where they thought that things should move to. I found this a little confusing when I first looked at it. I had to kind of go back and look at what the screen looked like in 10 and what it looks like now before it sort of made sense to me. So, so if you go into version 10 and you go to worksite setup, provided you have ability to make a new site. I'm in as admin. So the new button is here, right next to the edit and delete buttons. They're all kind of in a row right next to each other. In the current interface, if you go to worksite setup, new is up here at the top, kind of like a tab, and then the edit, delete, hard delete buttons are down here below. So it sort of got disconnected from its fellows there. And I think that's part of what he was talking about, that some of the markup was lost. But they're suggesting that the new should be moved down so that it is in line with these, and that these elements, the filters and the search, should actually appear below the information box. Right now, they're kind of all up here above this sort of intro piece, and they're saying that that would make better sense to have it below that, and the search as well, closer to the actual results. So I wanted to present this to our group here just to see if anybody has any feedback on that, or anything they'd like to add to this. Sean is saying it was an intentional change. Okay. He's looking for the Sakai ticket. Okay, so the reason new is a page. Edit and delete are actions. Okay. So so when you go to new, you go to a whole new screen, and edit and delete are just actions to items on the existing page. Right. Okay, so you select items here and then you would edit or delete. Okay. All right. Yeah, that does make sense when you look at it from that perspective. I don't know if anybody else on the call has a strong sense one way or the other. It does look a little disconnected to me, this option up here kind of all by itself. I think maybe part of it is that there's only one of them. It's not like a lot of tabs you see. There's like at least 2 or 3 tabs along the top. So, and then, possibly moving the filters. I don't know if that was something that was also intentional, of having those kind of up at the very top. Should probably have a list table like assignments. Let's take a look at assignments. Okay. Yeah, something like this, where you would have these options here and then the edit, delete at the bottom. So there would be checkboxes here then well, there is an edit, delete at the bottom. Okay, maybe it's this information section that's kind of throwing things off a little bit. If this were closer to the table, it might look a little more continuous.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's kind of strange to have the instructions below. It says check a box and use the buttons above or below to take an action on the site. So I agree with you that it's strange to have that message there.
Yeah. Yeah, the layout of this whole section, I think, could maybe be improved a little bit to make it a little more user-friendly. So maybe we can go back to Matt, because part of that they had suggested actually moving this up and moving these elements down. So I think that might help. And then the issue with the new being a page, let's see, was he saying that it was edit and delete? They lost their markup. But that might not necessarily mean that they have to be in a different location on the page. So it just means that they're missing their markup. So yeah, I think this is a little confusing. Maybe if this were moved up and this was reworked slightly. Okay, any other feedback on this one? I can relay that back to the accessibility group, and then if they want to put in a ticket, or we can talk with them to see if that's going to work for their purposes in terms of markup, and put in some sort of a joint JIRA on that.
Wilma, just one quick thing while we're on this page that maybe someone can speak to it. So I noticed that the pagination here and other places is centered. And I'm not sure when or how that decision was made. It makes it really prominent. And I'm not sure that pagination is really something you want or need to be that prominent.
Front and center. Yeah, it does look a bit odd. I was distracted looking up here, but yeah, it's kind of strange to have it in the middle of the page.
It used to be on the far right, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it used to be over here.
Yeah, and we've been going, just a side note, we've been going through and creating Morpheus JIRAs for all of the existing Morpheus issues that have come up during our testing. So I do seem to recall that being one of the JIRA subtasks that was created, was trying to, push that far right. So yeah, I think
so there's already a JIRA out for that. Okay, yeah, I'm wondering, is it like that?
But maybe it would affect both. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's kind of in different places, because here, if you go to sites, it's over on the left, and so where is it here? Oh, we don't have any to look at, but yeah, I seem to remember it being over in the right on other tools.
Yeah, so. I've definitely seen it different places, but I've seen it in more than one place in the center. I just wanted to see if that was intentional. I wouldn't think it would be, but just double checking.
Yeah, Sean is saying in the chat that he thinks it's just one of the inconsistencies. Yeah. So yeah, I agree, though. I don't think it necessarily needs to be a centered element.
Yep. Cool.
Okay, cool. Any other thoughts? And thanks, Sean, for your clarification on that. That's really helpful. Sean says that would be one of his goals of the Switch project.
Right.
And remind me again what that acronym is. Standardization within tools could happen. Okay. I knew it was something like that, but thanks. Cool. Okay, well, we're just about out of time. So unless anybody has any other items they would like to bring to the table, give folks a second in case you want to type something in real quick. Nope. Okay, great. Well, our next meeting will be right after the Sakai conference. So it'll be the first Monday in June. So I guess about a week or two after the conference. So hopefully we'll have some good information to share regarding the usability testing that we plan to do at the conference. If you are attending, please stop by and do some testing. We haven't decided yet what we are testing, but we will be testing something. So we'll be putting together some scripts between now and the end of the month to do some actual live testing there at the conference. Sean's asking, are there still slots for testable material? Yes, if you have something that you would like us to test, please let me know. And I can take that back to the group of folks who volunteered to help me facilitate. So yes, if you're working on something and you'd like some user feedback, please let us know. So, okay, well, thanks everyone for attending, and I appreciate your time, and thanks again to Kyle and Jeff from NYU for a wonderful presentation there on their testing protocols. And again, thanks to University of Hawaii and Walsh for assisting with the testing. So I will talk to you all again next month. Thanks, everybody.